This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot for your first free downloadable book and your first free 30-day trial. I'm telling you, man, I feel like I've been in a car accident.
that kind of work will do it to you, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've been lifting those 150-pound beams up all week on this construction site. I was in a motorcycle accident probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. I don't think I physically hurt being in a motorcycle accident than I do right now. Getting too old for this stuff, man.
I hear you, man. Getting old for that kind of stuff, but we're still out hunting monsters.
Yeah. On a positive note, a girl that was probably, God, she couldn't have been more than 22, wanted to give me her number, or tried to give me her number.
Uh-oh.
But, yeah, you know, we're all the 22-year-old girls when I was 22, you know what I mean?
Well, you know, they're never interested in you when you're with the right age to take advantage of that. You know, it's always when you're old that they all want you and you want nothing to do with them at that point. Well, you might, I mean, but, you know, I'm kind of over the hill, so.
Yeah, 22 is still 22, you know.
This is true, you know.
Yeah, it just made me laugh. I was just like, really?
That's funny.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Well, wading through emails.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, the one nice thing I like about with the guests or with all of our listeners is we get a lot of really great messages from folks out there and lots of really good accounts coming in. I guess should we talk about the one funny one this week, the YouTube video with the Russian newscaster?
Yeah, I was laughing when I saw that, man. I
don't even know where to begin to describe that one. I mean, we're going to have to post it up on the fan page on Facebook because it's really hilarious. I mean, if you want a good laugh, folks, you got to go there and click on it. It's only about 4 minutes long, but it's just funny as hell. Yeah, it's funny when you get wrapped up in this whole Bigfoot business. I guess you kind of become numb to a lot of things. And watching the newscaster go through the different people of the Bigfoot world and kind of what's going on, it's really laughable. It's like she said, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I was busting up. I was just like, to actually hear it from kind of an outsider and have her go through the different people, I was like, wow, this really is a circus. This really is. Like, sometimes you really have to get that sort of view from outside of the whole subject to see what people across the world and other places are how they view what's going on here. And I laughed my tail off. I thought that was hilarious. It was funnier, or as funny, if not funnier, than the guys we talked about last week. Yeah, it was funny to watch her reaction. How she couldn't hold a straight face. She's busting up. I mean, I'll post it up on Facebook. I'll find the link and post it up. It is good for a good laugh, you know. Oh yeah, and like I said, I wouldn't even know how to begin to describe it. You just have to go there and watch it, and it's well worth going and checking out. Yeah, it's hilarious. It really is. Okay, our first guest here is Johnny from Ohio. What's interesting about Johnny's story is that he has some information about one of the Type 3s, or what is commonly referred to as the Dogman type creatures. And we don't get very much of that yet, so it's something new that we're looking into, and I think Johnny will be an interesting guest. Usually what I do is when I talk to somebody about their encounter is just try to get a little bit of background, by starting off asking things like, now before the incident, what kind of knowledge did you have of the subject of Bigfoot? I'd watch stuff on TV about it, all kinds of, like Monster Quest, stuff like that. And what originally got me started in it was, way back in the day, Unsolved Mysteries, the old school one, on TV, and they showed a bunch of stuff on it, and it scared me to death, like, when I was really young. And my mom wanted to show me that it wasn't something to be afraid of or anything like that. So she took me to the library, and we read, like, all the books, all kinds of VHS tapes on it, and stuff like that to show me that it wasn't something to be scared of. Yeah, pretty much after that, I just would watch stuff on it whenever I got a chance. Okay. Now, what part of the country is this? Ohio. Ohio. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, let's go forward then to your encounter. Can you tell us what you were doing prior to leading up to this? Pretty much me, my girlfriend at the time, and two of her friends, we were just kind of out driving around because we had nothing really better to do. And we'd just go and drive for
hours on end and pretty much try and get lost. That, and we were underage, and we would go out and drink a little bit and stuff like that and just hang out. We had just pulled off in this little gravel turnaround, or this little gravel, it was around a curve, and there was a gravel section off to the side of the road off to the left, probably wide enough for a car and a half, like maybe a breakdown lane. So we park, I'll get out, and we're playing the radio in the car, and just kind of hanging out. It started getting dark, and off to our left, there was a huge honeysuckle bush. I mean, this thing was the biggest honeysuckle bush I've ever seen, and it was right on the edge of a wood line. And as we were kind of hanging out and talking, kept hearing stuff like branches breaking, stuff like that. And we thought it was maybe, an animal like a raccoon or something like that. It started getting louder and louder. After, like that night I didn't drink anything because, one, I don't like vodka, and they had just finished off drinking the vodka. The one guy that drove wanted to scare it off by throwing the bottle into the honeysuckle bush. So as he threw it in there, or he threw it into the bushes, and the sound stopped. So we kind of shrugged it off, and within a minute or two, that bottle comes flying back and lands into the road. So it goes past us into the road, and this scares us all to death because we're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's no lights. I don't even remember the last house we saw. And so we all freak out and run, jump back in the car, and we go the opposite way we came. And we must have been driving for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and we had to stop because there's a huge, well, not really a huge, there's a pretty large branch laying in the road. Me and him jump out to go move it. And by that time it was already dark, so the headlights are on and everything. So we run out, or I get out, he gets out, we run over to move this thing, and we could barely move it. Like we ended up having to spin it rather than pick it up and throw it off to the side of the road. It was too heavy for us both, and for us to try and actually lift up and pick up and move. And while we're doing that, this really horrible smell comes waving in because the wind started blowing, and it smelled like something like garbage, or like a wet dog and garbage, and like a mix of like rotting meat and that. And with that, as we're doing that, we hear movement pretty much like all around us, and it wasn't little cracks from the wind blowing in the trees. It was large snaps of branches all around. And so once we get the branch spun enough to where we could get by, because if we would have tried to drive around it, like I said, we wouldn't have made it because off to the side of the road there was a small ditch. Right. And if we would have tried to drive in that car, it would have got stuck. The interesting thing about that was I wasn't on the end where it was broke off at. There was no way a branch of that size would have broke and fell into the road because there was no tree canopy over top of the road. It was cut back. Maybe after we move it, we run and jump back in the car and we just take off. After that, we never really went back to the area for a while.
So you got another encounter after that?
Yeah, we did.
How long after this?
This all took, how long after that one? Yeah. I would say probably a couple years. Because me and that girl at the time were together for about 3 or 4 years. This one I actually did see something, and I still kind of doubt myself on what exactly I saw because it's just one of the things where, in my mind, it's like, what? This doesn't happen to me. It happens I always hear about it happening to other people, and I had no idea. I didn't know that something like that existed in Ohio. Like, I heard of the Perry County grass man and stuff like that, but I always thought it was an old kind of settler's tale, like that one, like the one where the guy got attacked by something in the 1800s, I think, and his daughter fought it off with a rock or something like that. Like, I figured it was one of those tales, like an older tale. The one that I saw personally was me and the same girl, we were driving around again. We're driving on the backcountry road again, and as we're driving, the sun's setting behind us, and it was probably beyond us because we had just turned the headlights on, and we had just got done coming around a curve. I want to say does, but it was about springtime, maybe early summer. 2 deer run out in the road, and they act like we're not even there. So she jams on the brakes, and I'm in the passenger seat, and she comes to a stop, and so I was like, man, that was close. She goes, yeah. And I just happened for some reason to look up in the rearview mirror to see if there's any more deer coming. When I do, I see, and this is exactly what I saw, I see something taking one big step into the road, like a mid-step, and it lands on its right leg. From what I'm seeing in the rear view, I'm seeing from about mid to thigh up to its stomach, and then I watched it swing its left leg or its right leg forward, and as it steps, it puts its hand down on the trunk of the car, like not pressing down on it, but just kind of put its hand on it, kind of like when you don't want to run into something where it's a low, it's like a low, yeah, so it caught itself so it wouldn't hit it. And even though the sun was behind us, and it was still getting really dark, I was able to see this because of the tail lights, and so everything was red. And I kind of blinked like this. It seems like it took forever in my mind, but I blinked, and I looked over at her, and she's wide-eyed, and she's white, and her mouth is open, and I see her eyes turning up. So I look back, and it's, already going across the road. So I turn around, I'm like, and again, in my head, I was like, what did I just see? So I open the door and step out, but leave the door open. And on the other side of the road, this would be to my right, it went down a little embankment right into the woods. And I see something probably from the armpits up, or at least that's where I focused on, from the armpits up. And its shoulders were really wide, and it was black or dark brown. From the last little bit of light that was coming off, because the sun was setting, I could see it had ears on top of its head, like a dog. And from what I could see from the ears, they were real thin, not really wide, not really that fuzzy. And its general head and shape of its head was kind of dome shaped, more or less. It looked like its sides were kind of flat, and the top of its head was just slightly rounded or flat. But it acted like we weren't even there. It just kept going.
Yeah. Do you think it knew you were there?
I think it knew we were there, but it was kind of too focused on the deer.
So, Johnny, was this more of a dog? More of a, what they call like a dog?
I believe so. That's what I've always chalked it up as.
Was the body, did it look more primate or more human-like in appearance, besides the head, of course?
It honestly reminded me of like a more thinner, it was definitely thinner. Like everything I think of when I think of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I think of a patty film, and the big broad shoulders and the not compact, but just really stocky and built. And
yeah.
But these ones, in my opinion, and what I saw from it was not as wide as Patty looked, but it was definitely probably about 1.5 times my shoulders. And I'm I have pretty broad shoulders, so it was at least 1.5 times my width. And I remember the leg was, it's probably 6 inches bigger round as mine.
What did you think when you saw it?
What the hell did I just see? Because it was way too big to be a person.
Right.
And there's nobody what did I just see? Unless there's some 7-foot dude running around with a ghillie suit on at 8:30 at night.
What was going through your mind? And I know we got a few other guests we have to get to, and I really do appreciate you sharing your encounter. No,
thank you for having me on.
No, I appreciate you sharing it. I wanted to know what was going through your mind when you guys tossed the vodka bottle out the first time, and then to have it come throwing back through the air. What was going through your mind? Where you think? I mean,
to be completely honest, at first I thought like somebody was kind of somebody was playing a joke, you know.
Yeah.
But then it dawned on us that nobody was around at all. Like I said, I don't even remember the last time we passed a house or anything. Because after it got thrown, you know, it just got dead quiet. There was no more branches breaking, nothing. It just didn't feel right. It was, once I flew back, it was like, we gotta get out of here. I don't want to know what threw the bottle back, because no animal in the woods here in Ohio will throw a bottle back.
Yeah, I think I'd be a little worried about that too.
Yeah. The thing is, it could have hit us because it flew past us and landed in the road. So if it really wanted to hit us with that bottle, it definitely could have.
I was interested, when you saw the creature, you mentioned ears. Did you get a chance to see any of the face at all? I mean, the shape in particular.
No, I didn't. I saw in the rear view, I saw it from about mid-leg to stomach, and then by the time I got out of the car, it was already off to the side of the road, and all I got to see was the back of its shoulders and the back of its head.
Okay. I was just wondering, you know, we get, like Wes said, there's not a whole lot known about these Type 3 creatures, and oftentimes people will describe them as having a snout, you know, almost like a dog. And I tend to think that with primates, you know, of course, many primates have a protruding lower face, so that might be mistaken, you know, for a dog appearance, but the ears are kind of the tip-off in this case.
That's what made me think of a werewolf pretty much, basically, the whole time, like a wolf man and stuff like that. It's not really hearsay stories, but ones that, like one of my friends when we grew up around that area, that they'd talk about their cars being paced by something off to the side, and they'd be going about maybe 35, 40 down these back roads, and something would be pacing their car. And the most interesting one for me is two of them is one of our friends that I had back in the day, her family raised horses, and when, like, she came to school one day and she was she was upset because her horse died. Something happened to it and it died. So that day when we dropped her off, we saw the horse pen, and they had a backhoe and they were digging a big hole for it, and they were just going to roll it in and bury it. So evidently that day it did. And then that following Monday, she came back to school and she was real sad again. We're like, "You still sad about your horse?" She goes, "Well, yeah." And we're like, "All right." And she goes, "Something dug it up." And we're like, "What?" Something, according to her, after they buried it on that Friday or Saturday, the next day when they went out to feed the rest of the horses, something had dug up that horse and drug it out of the hole, like half out of the hole to where its head was dangling in, and something cored it out, like ate it out, like completely gutted it. But the thing is, I couldn't find any of the guts or anything.
Kumbo talked about that, like when he told me a story one time where someone's dog had died and they had buried it, and then they got up the next morning and something had actually dug up the dog and actually, same thing as you're describing with the horse, basically gutted it in the middle of the night. And so, I mean, it's kind of believable, you know. Kumbo has actually told me a few stories like that where something has actually dug something up and corded it out, like, you know, a beloved pet, like a horse or a dog or something like that.
Yeah, I've personally never heard anything like that, and I'm more terrified of what's strong enough to pull a horse up out of a hole.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because we don't have anything big like that around that area.
I thought Bigfoot creeped me out, but Dogman really creeps me out.
Yeah. And I do have a question about. Sorry about that.
No,
I have one final question. Here recently, you guys have been doing shows about the government cover-up with that. What would ultimately be the reason why? I mean, Russia, they're openly, more or less seems like they're openly wanting people to talk about it. But it seems more or less the government in the United States is kind of pulling a blanket over everything. Why would you ultimately think that? Why? I mean, I heard you guys speculate on the forestry and stuff like that.
I've actually been in contact with people involved with forestry at various levels, you know, who are government employees, and they agree with my view that, and I'm going to be writing about this in one of my new books, but in a nutshell, it has to do with economics. And,
yeah, that's exactly what I thought, because it would take...
Right. Well, with any issue like this, I mean, if, it's one thing to have an owl or some smaller species, and the impact that has on forests and surrounding communities and how people use forest products, or if they're even able to, depending on, the impact. But if something like a large primate were proven to exist, in the continental U.S., then not only national forest lands, federally governed lands, but even private lands could be theoretically confiscated.
Yeah.
And, people wouldn't be too happy about their property being seized by the government because, the Sasquatch habitat was being studied. I think that would cause a lot of problems. And look what the spotted owl did to logging communities in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it really trashed those communities' economic systems. And they never recovered from that. So it would be a big deal. And I think if we follow the money in that case, that's going to lead us to those answers.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, too. I mean, just imagine the social and economic impact of finding out that there's more than one thing that walks on two legs now. I mean, all the things everybody's brought up saying that, man is, top of the food chain. We're the smartest because of reason X, Y, and Z. We walk bipedally, which means, we're the top of the food chain type thing. And it would, I think, in my mind, it would just turn around and just bring it all crashing down.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's just logging, but you got to think of the ripple effect beyond logging. Billions and billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have any questions for Johnny. Do you have any further questions? Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Johnny. I mean, it was cool.
We covered it.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, we sure appreciate you sharing your incidents with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, thank you guys. I found your guys' podcast at the beginning of the year, and I've listened to everything just because I was bored one day looking for different podcasts, and your guys just happened to pop up, and I love it. I think you guys are kind of my go-to guys when it comes to any of this stuff. And I know you guys don't claim to be experts, but you guys are the most professional-sounding ones I've heard so far. And to me, that is an expert. So,
well, I appreciate that.
We certainly do. Our next guest is Philip from Ohio. He's got a very interesting account he'd like to share with us.
Hey, William, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you this evening?
Oh, I can't complain.
Wes is on the line here with us.
Hey, Philip.
Awesome. Hey, Wes, how are you? I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing this evening? That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Doing all right. Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, usually what I do is, with everybody, is we'll just kind of give a little background. I like to always know what people knew about the subject of Bigfoot before they had any sort of an encounter.
Yeah.
So if you could just tell us what you knew prior to what your experience was, or, thoughts and experiences there, that would be great.
Yeah. So growing up, my mom was kind of instrumental in my introduction to Bigfoot and Sasquatch and everything. Every time there was a special on the History Channel, she would watch it. And, of course, being a little kid, I'd be so enthralled by the idea of, this monster living in the woods or something like that. The biggest thing for me growing up was understanding more so what it was and its actions. And the more that I grew older, the more I realized that, they weren't necessarily these big, large, docile creatures, because that's how, when I was growing up on TV, that they were portrayed, you'd always see the patty footage where they were, it was running away and it was scared, and it's, at least from my encounters, it's the complete opposite effect, they're more assertive and they want to be more dominant, but, just overall, growing up, like I said, you have the television shows put them on as these far-cyclic, creatures that are going to be big and docile, and you can go pet them, or, they aren't going to harm you or anything like that, which I couldn't buy that in a million years after my two encounters,
Okay, well, so let's fast forward then to the first time you had an encounter. What were you doing that led up to that incident?
Yeah, so the first time I had an encounter, my buddy and I were fishing on a river in a small town near where I live. I live in Twinsburg, Ohio, and we were fishing, kind of an out of the way branch of a river called the Chagrin River by us, and it's kind of far back in the woods, like kind of in this gorge with a bunch of hemlocks and pine trees and maple trees and all that good stuff. But we had been, just fishing throughout the course of the day and, just kind of having a blast, throwing rocks and raising all kinds of hell, being, just fresh out of high school and all that good stuff. The one thing about this river that is not really known about it is that when it floods in the early spring, when we have all the snow melt and runoff and everything, is it creates like these little chutes. Typically like a river will flood and you'll have these big floodplains. Well, there's this little island that seems to sit there. And there was like this little chute that we would always cut through when we would, walk or, go fishing. And so this one time I had this particular time that we went, I was feeling, kind of uneasy about the whole thing, but I said, there's nothing there. I'm just not going to pay any attention to it. And we started to cut through this little offshoot, and all of a sudden I started to smell like a rotten, musky urine smell. So I didn't think twice about it, but I said to my buddy, I said, hey, do you smell that? And he says, yeah, you probably are so excited about catching all these fish, you probably, peed all over yourself. And, we kind of getting back and forth to each other, but we didn't really think about it. So we crossed back over the river and we started to hike and fish our way upstream again. And that took us probably about 2 or 3 hours. And we made it to kind of like these set of falls. There's 3 sets of falls. The first 2 are easy, to get over. The last set is probably about 20 or so feet high that kind of dead ends in a town. All the tourists like to go and look at it and take pictures of it and all that stuff like that. So when we got there, instead of cutting back through town, which would have been, in my idea, the better solution, he wanted to fish his way back down and try and catch, some more fish that we had missed. So we started fishing our way back down, and we're getting to the portion where we cross over the river. We're probably about, I'd say 1,500 feet or so from where we cross the river. And all of a sudden I start hearing, like a shuffling in the leaves, and I kind of look over and don't really think anything of it. And so we start walking a little bit more, and I start to hear, instead of shuffling, footsteps. And again, I stop and don't really think anything of it, just kind of talking, thinking, it's probably a deer or something like that. And so we get to about 100 feet away from where we cross, and all of a sudden I get this really uneasy feeling that something is there. It's kind of like you're being hunted almost. And so I heard the footsteps again, and this time it was mixed with shuffling. I snapped my head real quick to the right, and I didn't catch, it was like the famous picture of the blob squatchers that you always see, I saw that in my eye, and I heard, and I immediately froze, and he took off across the river. But I froze, and I myself, being raised in the outdoors, I thought it was a bear, so I wanted to try to keep my eyes on whatever was out there. So I turned my back, and I started to backpedal towards the river, very slowly, not really trying to raise my blood pressure or anything like that or get too nervous, because, obviously if it's a bear, it's going to chase you. Once I heard that noise and started backpedaling, I didn't really see anything else, but I definitely got the idea that I wasn't wanted there. Whatever it was very angry. It was such a deep guttural growl. It was so primeval that I couldn't, it still bothers me to kind of think about it. I get a little bit shaky talking about it. And it's really disturbing to the point where I get, I can feel the vibrations in my chest. I can still feel those vibrations in my chest from that growl that I heard.
That's what it's West experienced.
Yeah, I've listened a lot. I've heard Wes's stories all over the place, and every time he describes it, like I get that feeling that, oh my God, I'm reliving this again.
Yeah. I understand what you feel it in your chest. I mean, I know exactly what you mean when you say that. And you do. You really.
And a lot of people. Oh yeah, and the thing a lot of people don't, and because so many people haven't experienced it, but the best way I can equate it to a lot of people is if you get your car and you find a rap song that has the heaviest bass on it, you turn your bass all the way up in your car, and that still doesn't touch what it feels like in your chest. Yeah. So I backpedaled towards the river. Once I felt the gravel beneath my feet, I turned my back and I started walking, you know, trying not to panic or anything. And by that time, my buddy was all the way up the river, and he was standing on the road over the bridge waiting for me, you know. But that was definitely...
What a jerk.
What was that?
I said, what a jerk. He's not backing you up. He's taking off.
Oh, no, he grew up a lot. He grew up in Chicago, so he hasn't spent as much time in the woods as I have. You know, his first instinct for everything is to run, you know. I myself understand if it's a bear, I got to keep my eyes on it because it's going to want to kill me if I start to run.
Yeah. No, I was just playing with you. I was rude. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I'm not. It doesn't insult me. It'll probably get him a little bit. But yeah, you know, that was my first experience, and that was, you know, for me kind of disturbing because the area that we live in is a fairly well-populated area. You know, I mean, it's not like it's in the back of beyond, but it's also not city as well, you know. But yeah, that was relatively disturbing for me. I still have problems going to that section of river, and in fact, I won't fish where we cross. I won't fish past that point. You know, it's got some kind of juju on that ground for me.
I don't blame you. So you didn't actually see it then. You just heard the growl and you heard the vocalizations and...
Yes.
Yeah. No, when you hear the vocalizations, though, I mean, it's one of those things to where you can't really, like the growl we heard, how you described it with the bass and everything. I mean, you can't, it's hard to pinpoint what else it could be. You know what I mean? There's nothing else that makes it.
You can't say for sure that it's a Sasquatch, but, you know, what else could make a noise like that?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's my exact thought, because I've actually got a buddy who works for the Division of Natural Resources out here, and he played me some bear calls, and he was, you know, some like bear noises and all that stuff, and he said, "Is this what you heard?" And I said, "Definitely not what I heard. That time's about 10." You know, and he was like, "Well, there's nothing in this area that I know of that does that."
And you're in Ohio, aren't you, Philip?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you guys have out there? Black bear?
We have down where we had that incident. There are actually no bears that live in that area anymore. Now, up where I live, up in Twinsburg, and, you know, towards this area of town, they come right through here on their way over to Pennsylvania. You know, we're kind of like the bear highway through Twinsburg, but through Chagrin, there's nothing as far as bears go anymore. Historically there have been, but nowadays no more.
Yeah. Yeah, and usually bears don't have that growl that you're describing.
No, as far as I've heard, no.
Yeah. So what happened on your second encounter?
So the second encounter actually happened, it's going to be about 2 years ago this September. My now fiance, she came out from LA to Ohio for my birthday, and we went down to Hocking Hills, which is about 45 minutes south of Columbus, it's pretty close to Salt Fork, if you guys are familiar with that area. And this one kind of disturbs me a lot more because I kind of go into protector mode on this one. And what had happened is we got there on a Thursday night into this campground out in Hocking Hills National Forest or National Park or whatever they want to call it. And I chose a camp spot that I had camped at a few times, and it's pretty far back from the main trailhead. You know, it's probably about a mile and a half back of really easy walking, but it's really densely wooded. You know, a lot of people will take they'll pull wagons and everything like that to bring all their camping equipment and stuff back. But we just took, you know, a couple backpacks in with a tent and sleeping bags and stuff. So the night that I had this particular encounter was that Thursday night that we had arrived, and there was, you know, other than the people at the main trailhead who were basically car camping, there was no one to be seen within this area of campground. And so it was about 10:15 I went to bed, or my fiance had gone to bed, and I was getting ready to put out the fire, and I put it out and everything, and it was an oddly quiet night. You know, you didn't hear like grasshoppers, you didn't hear like squirrels thrashing around or anything like that. And it didn't really, you know, at the time it didn't make much sense to me. I was like, well, I know it's September and, you know, animals are probably getting ready to hibernate or whatever, but it is what it is. So I put the fire out and I went to, you know, I got in the tent and zipped it up and went to sleep. And I woke up at about 10:30 or 11:30 at night, and I could see, because the trees were starting to lose their leaves for the fall. And I woke up, and I was kind of like in a half-dazed sleep, but I was fully aware of what was going on around me. And I looked straight up because we didn't have the rain fly on because there was no rain in the forecast or anything like that. It was really nice out. And I looked up, and, there was this head looking in our tent. And the oddest thing about it is that it looked kind of like a football player had a helmet on where there was no neck. It was a head resting on shoulders, and I could see hair. It wasn't real long hair, but it was really, you could tell by the texture of it, it was crinkly and coarse, and, it was a really, it almost looked like horse hair. It was so thick and crinkly, and
so
I kind of turned over.
It poked its head in the tent? It was like it was over the tent. Oh, okay.
Like it was looking down on top of us.
I got you.
And, I didn't think, I definitely didn't want to make, go ahead.
That's not much better, but.
No.
Okay,
No.
Go ahead.
And so, not wanting to panic or, startle my fiance, I kind of just rolled over and pulled the covers over my head, and I said, whatever it is, it's going to go away. And so I fell back asleep, and I woke up about 3:30 then to go to the bathroom. And, I had pretty much forgotten about it. And so I hopped out of the tent, and I walked about maybe 50 feet into the surrounding woods and to the rear of the tent. And going back from there, there was a tree that was about, a full-grown tree. And then there was another tree that was standing next to it that had gotten hit by lightning or something like that. And because it was all black and broken off about, the break off is about, I'm 6 foot tall, and it came up to my chest where the break off was. So subtract a foot, so about 5 feet tall. And I'm going to the bathroom, and I'm kind of looking in the woods, and I wipe, how you wipe the cold out of your eyes when you wake up. And I looked up, and I saw this head kind of like bobbing in and out of the tree, kind of like looking at me. And so, I kind of did one of those things where you open your eyes real big, and it put its left hand on the tree and stepped out to behind the half. So it stepped out from the full tree to the half tree. And when it stepped out from behind that full tree and it was standing behind that half tree, like I said, that half tree came up to about my chest. This thing had to have been 6.5 feet tall, and I could clearly, plain as day, see it. With the moonlight shining on it, I could see this thing looking at me. And it wasn't really moving. It had its left hand on the tree, and it was kind of just saying, I could hear it going, like it was trying to figure out what I was doing. And, because Will and I have been talking via email, and he said, it sounds like he was trying to challenge you. And I myself, I'm a very non-threatening person. I'm about 6 feet tall. At the time, I was about 150 pounds of pure skin and bone. I was the least threatening person you could ever run across in the woods, But when I saw that, I hopped back in the tent, backpedaled my way, keep an eye on it, backpedaled my way back into the tent and went back in there. The oddest thing about it was when I went the next day to look around, that tree area to see, how tall it was, just kind of get a frame of reference. Like I said, that tree came up about mid-chest on me. And I was like, wow, that thing had to have been pretty daggum tall to be as far over it as it was. It had real big, box-like shoulder, it had real big broad shoulders. Its head was gigantic. It was a lot bigger than I expected it to be. Because you see, the Patterson gimlet, and this I always refer to the Patty footage because it's the most well-known footage, In the video, that head doesn't look very big, but now seeing what I have seen, that head looks absolutely gigantic.
Yeah, people don't really grasp, the dimensions of these things until you're, standing in front of one.
No,
let me ask you this, Philip.
Yeah.
So I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm trying to think about if I'm laying in a tent, and so you're laying up and you're looking up and you're seeing the thing looking over. I'm assuming you're seeing like the outline of it looking in your tent.
Uh-huh.
what was going through your mind? I mean, how do you go back to sleep after something like that? I mean, you kind of did like the 12-year-old, like, I'm going to put the covers over my head, which I don't blame you. I probably would have done the same thing. But, I mean, how do you go from that to where it's like, well, I got to go out and take a pee now? I mean, were you armed to the teeth or something?
No, I've never owned a gun in my life. I will never own a gun in my life. All my family members do. And for me, it's just, it's not something that I'm not a tree hugger by any means because I spend a lot of time in the outdoors. But at the same time, I don't hunt. I have no reason to own a weapon. The idea that was going through my mind when I was laying there looking at it, oh my God, this thing wants me. But when I kind of rolled over and I laid there for about an hour waiting to go back to sleep or hear anything from it, and I didn't hear anything, I thought at that point, well, whatever it was, if it wanted me, it would have gotten me.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
You probably
nothing is. Yeah, 3 millimeters of nylon and a 10 millimeter sleeping bag aren't going to stop a Sasquatch.
I think the fact that you didn't do anything except basically ignore it kind of diffused the situation. It was, you didn't respond to the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't.
And I mean, for me, exactly. I don't. Like I said, I come off as very non-threatening. I engage a lot of people. It's what I do for a living. I engage people. And I understand, having how to defuse. I know how to diffuse people. But in that situation, I was like, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If this thing's going to rip my arm off and beat me at the bloody end, it's going to do that.
Right. You wouldn't have a lot of choice.
Exactly. I wouldn't, whether I had a gun or not, especially from the story, Wes, that you tell. Oh my gosh. I couldn't, I couldn't imagine being in, having a gun and being in your shoes. I would have been like, well, I guess I'm going to save one round for myself.
And, holding a gun in your hand standing in front of one isn't any guarantee either. I mean, my own encounter the first time with two of them, I mean, granted, it was only a 22, but I think had I had my hunting rifle or my 12 gauge, I don't think I would have felt any safer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, big as they are and as intimidating as they are, it's, there should be good reason that people are afraid of them. And for, everyone in my family kind of mocks me because I've, told my stories a couple of times and I don't tell a whole lot of people about them. But they're always like, well, I'd shoot it. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. No, you would not. I understand you guys hunt for deer and I understand you guys hunt for, whatever else you hunt for. But you see one of these things, you're going to turn white as a ghost and you're going to be gripping that gun white knuckle and forget how it works.
Right. It's easy to make those, statements without actually having had that experience. I've heard a lot of people make all kinds of statements, and when you talk to people like the three of us, have all been in that situation to be right in front of one or more. And it's a whole different attitude than people who haven't. And they make all kinds of statements about they would do this or they would do that. Well, they don't know what they would do unless they were in that situation.
Right.
Exactly. For me, it kind of comes down to, the whole, situation of even if you did see something like that, what makes you think that it's not a person in a suit, And would you really want to risk shooting someone?
I think I could tell if it was somebody in a suit. And if I had a rifle in my hands with somebody in a suit, I think I'd scare the crap out of them first and make them get out of that suit in a hurry.
Yeah, I think the tables are people.
So like, dude, you're somebody in a suit, you better get that zipper in motion quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. For me, I just, especially after what I went through and, listening to your guys' stories countless times, I couldn't, even with a gun, I couldn't imagine doing anything or trying to act on something. It's.
And, we've made too, that if you did shoot one, I think you'd have a problem where the other ones, it's like, you mentioned the Patterson film. I asked Bob Gimlin once why he and Roger didn't follow that creature. And he said, we were afraid of where the other two were. Because, there were three of them in that situation. They weren't seen, but there were three of them in the area. And the one they filmed was the smallest of the three. So they were very concerned about that.
I couldn't imagine being in, and I mean, it's threatening enough when you have one looking at you, but, because now that I think about it, there could have always been, one standing to my left or one standing to my right, and I wouldn't have noticed it because I was so focused on the one directly in front of me.
Exactly. That's a common thread in these accounts. And like with Wes and Woody's encounter, there were four of them.
Mm-hmm. man, I couldn't imagine going through that. And, the more I hear, people who come forward with stories that sound halfway logical, it's a matter of when they see them and they start to follow them, they do feel like they're being led into a trap.
Right, exactly. And
I think they kind of
accounts out there are very logical and they make a great deal of sense.
Yeah. It's.
How far away was the Sasquatch when you were out there peeing? How far away was the Sasquatch from you?
It was about 150 feet away from me. And
Wow.
And that's, a rough guess on it. And I was standing, the thing that made me kind of question how big it was, and the whole reason why I walked down there was I was standing on an uphill. It was kind of like looking down just a little bit. It had maybe a 2 to 3 degree decline, which, over 150 feet is a pretty substantial, loss of ground. And I walked down there and, I was like, man, that's up there pretty high. And that guy was at least another, foot over me, because it was about, if it was like looking at a human torso, it was about to its, belly button. And like I said, I'm about 6 feet tall. So
probably talking 7-8 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go 6.5 on the, on the on the shorter side just to make myself feel a little bit better, I think.
Is this? Do you ever go back? Have you ever gone back to this place?
So I had been, at the time I was 23, I had been camping down at Hocking Hill since I was about 18 years old. And I had always heard the stories of, Bigfoot down here, and, you really shouldn't camp by yourself and things like that. But that was the first, incident I had down there. It's an area that I would definitely like to see a little bit more of. And the reason why I say that is because living in, Northeast Ohio, around the Twinsburg, Cleveland area, we don't have a whole lot of incidences. They're a lot further east, into Ashtabula County, things like that. And for me, if I'm gonna see it, I kind of want to see a little bit further away from home, so at least I can be sure it's probably not going to track me home.
That's always a good point.
Exactly.
I don't bring Bigfoot home.
No, I can't imagine. I can't. I would turn this town upside down. We have a hard enough problem, dealing with Twins Day, let alone Bigfoot.
I think it would redefine not housebroken.
Exactly. But we are actually heading over to the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, and I'm really excited to kind of just sit out after having the experiences that I have had. Especially the last one that I had. I'm kind of excited to sit out there and kind of just, soak it all in for a couple of days and see if anything, tries to rear its ugly head. It's definitely a lot of this stuff, what it has, made me appreciate the outdoors a lot more and be more aware of the things around me. It's also sparked this whole new interest in me.
I'd say be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. You gonna go far next time?
I can't say that I will. It's.
Do you need
I know it's probably really. What's that?
I said, do you need to borrow again?
I probably should. I should probably say yes at this point. Again, if I saw it, I'd probably be like, oh my God, it's gonna rip my arm off.
I would say bear mace probably isn't a bad idea.
No, and I actually do I do have a couple cans of bear mace.
Yeah,
it's something that I do go camping with because.
I mean, because bears, of course, and any other wildlife that's in the area, but you never know. I mean, if you were in a situation where, the mock charge turned into something a little more aggressive, I think it's probably a good way to defend yourself.
Oh, yeah, like I said, bear mace is something I do carry with me. But I have a few, like they say for bears, it just turns humans into a peppery snack,
Go for the
Exactly. I'm not. It's something. If I do go armed, that'll be the one thing that I do carry. But it's kind of these whole instances. That the more that I think about them, the more intrigued I get by them. I've kind of been like a sponge the last year or so, trying to soak up all this information and listen to different people's accounts of what has happened to them, and kind of kind of trying, because, you know, every time you hear a story, you put yourself in that person's shoes and think, you know, what would I have done in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then you kind of relate back to your own story.
Yeah, that's a crazy encounter. I wonder if it, you said it was about an hour from the first time you saw it till you went up to go to the bathroom? Or
so I saw it, the first time I saw it was about 11:30, and then I went to the bathroom at about 3:30 in the morning.
You know, an interesting thought might be the fact that you were urinating, and a lot of animals use that to mark territory. So maybe when that creature was watching you do that, and then you just turned around and went back in the tent, you know, maybe that was just enough to sort of establish the boundary there.
Yeah. You know, and it could have been very much one of those things because, you know, like I said, the more I think about it, it's, you know, animals do this all the time. You know, like you said, you know, cats are notorious for it. Dogs are notorious for it. Right. Every animal in nature speaks with their pee, you know. Because after that night, you know, granted the campground did get a little more filled, but I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. You know, I never once felt like I was being watched or anything like that. You know, it was kind of like a one-night occurrence.
Yeah.
Now, that's something, folks, we're not advocating. So if you happen to run into a Sasquatch, don't pee in front of them.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
Yeah. I can't think of a more non-threatening position to be in.
I couldn't resist that.
Oh, that's
First
funny.
thing I would have thought to do when I was 16 and standing in front of two of them, you know, I might have wet myself, but I sure wasn't going to, you know, whip it out and pee in front of them.
Oh, if I wouldn't have had to have gone, trust me, I wouldn't have been out there. Because I do remember waking up a few times going, man, I really got to go. I can hold it a little bit. I'm going to wait till daylight.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I just couldn't make it.
Yeah, Mash. That's a good encounter, Philip. I mean, I really do appreciate it. That's a really cool encounter.
Very interesting story.
Has it consumed you yet?
Not 100% consume me. You know, I think like 95%.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely. I think my fiance would agree 100% at this point because, you know, there's not a night goes by where I don't, you know, have, you know, one of your guys' old, you know, podcasts playing or, you know, some of the other ones that are out there. You know, just like I said, to gain more and more information.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you, the best way to gain information that I found is listening to people's encounters and listening to, like Will always says, you know, listen to the behavior of what you hear in an encounter. I know John Green talked about that too, and even Renee Hendon talked about when you hear someone's encounter, the amount of information you can glean from someone's encounter is amazing. When you listen to you listen to what they did and then what the Sasquatch did and the whole behavior thing, you know, besides just it walked across the road. When you actually hear the behaviors, you can actually get a lot of information from people's encounters. I'm sure Will.
You really can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, back in '89, in the Yacold area, Washington, when the family there had their encounter with the Sasquatch, I saw it on the front page of the paper, and I thought, okay, you know, there's probably been a whole horde of people going out there, you know, want to be investigators and everything, but I thought, well, I'll go ahead and check it out anyway. So I drove out there, and sure enough, there had been at least 3 different groups of people out there to, you know, to question the family, and they were looking for footprints or hair, and that was pretty much it. So when I sat and talked to the people, I listened to their story, and they were talking about when young Nick Goldhammer ran down to the field, and he thought it was a person in the field, and he slipped on a tree branch and fell and made a bunch of noise, and the Sasquatch turned around hearing him to see what was behind it. And he said it got a real surprised look on its face. It kind of reared its head back a little bit. Then it sort of leaned forward like it was trying to get a better look. And then it put its arms out at 45-degree angles from its body with palms facing him and come walking after him like it was hurting him. And when he got up and ran to the house and put on some better boots, and, of course, by this time it turned around and was heading back down to the pasture, he went back after it again. Well, it saw him the second time, and this time it wasn't hurting him. It would come running after him. And he climbed up on an outbuilding, and it stood there and waited a while to make sure that he wasn't coming back down. Nick said then it turned around and resumed going the same direction it was going the first time. And I said, well, did any of these other people bother going down there to see where the Sasquatch was going? And he said, no. And I thought that was pretty odd. First time it herded him back, resumed the same course. Second time, come after him, and then resumed the same course. So I thought, well, there must be some reason it didn't want him going down there. So I asked if we could go look, and we walked across the creek and into another, there was a series of fields there, and I found a big cottonwood tree that had fallen over. And near the root wad of that tree had been a pool of water in the winter, and there was some dried mud there. And I found tracks of 2 young Sasquatches in that mud all over the place. So I said, well, there's the reason it was trying to keep Nick from going down there. There were 2 young ones hiding. So when you hear an account, you have to think about what was going on. And you can kind of get the bigger picture when you look at those details.
Yeah, it makes total sense. No, it makes total sense, why it was doing the actions that it was doing,
Exactly. And many people who claim they're investigators never look beyond, what I call the trophies. And I call most of them trophy hunters because they want something tangible. They can run around publicly, with a footprint cast or something like that and say, hey, look at me, I'm an expert, when they didn't pay a lick of attention to what else was happening and why it was happening.
I want to go to a clip. I want to go to a clip of Jeff Meldrum sitting in his bomb shelter holding a footprint cast. I'm just joking. That joke. Just joking. No, you're right. What were you gonna say, Philip?
No, I was gonna say, William's very right in the fact that so many people. Because I posted both of my stories on a certain website where field researchers of these animals hang out, and a guy in my area got in contact with me, and he said, well, did you collect hair? Did you get footprints? And did you get X, Y, and Z? And I said, well, no. And he said, flat out, he told me the first one that happened didn't really happen. The second one that he said, I was mostly mistaken a bear for what I was seeing. And both times, plain as day, I can tell you what I saw, because I didn't have that tangible evidence. I wasn't a good enough source for him,
I'll tell you something, there was an old saying we had when I was in the Army many years ago, and that's, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one and they all stink. The guy wasn't there, so how in God's name can he make a claim like that? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Now that they've got their show on and, they have these people, those people are doing the wrong thing, going out, because they're basically telling everyone that it's okay to go out in the woods and call for these things and try and lure them to them. They have this whole farcical idea that they're Pooh Bears, that you can pet them and comb them and, sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya.
Well, my opinion is those guys have not the slightest idea what they're doing.
No. And I will agree 1,000% with you.
Yeah.
But
it'd be nice if they'd actually see one and then give their opinion.
Well, it would be an underwear changing moment, sure.
Yeah.
That's my favorite term lately is an underwear changing moment. Instead of a life changing moment.
That's a good one. I might have to steal that one from Will. I hope you don't have it copywritten yet. No.
Did you have any other questions for Philip, Will, at all? I mean, his encounter was awesome. It's probably one of the coolest encounters I've heard.
Great information. We sure appreciate you bringing it, talking to us on the show about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I really appreciate you guys for having me on and not calling me crazy and not telling me my story isn't real.
No, a lot of the behaviors sound. A lot of the behaviors sound like a lot of stuff we've heard over and over again.
Yeah,
I mean,
these behaviors always repeat when they're real events. They do repeat, and we know that. I mean, I've heard so many over the past 40 years. I can spot a real story from a fake almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to know I'm not crazy because honestly, for the longest time, I thought I was losing my mind. There were about 3 months after the second incident where I was like, did that really happen? Did I really see what I think I saw? I've always been intrigued, but did I really see that?
Yeah.
Renee DeHenden used to crack me up. He'd always say that someone, had so-and-so had an incurable mental disease. And when somebody tells you that you didn't see something, but they've never seen anything, to me, that's a mental disease.
Yeah.
That person has some kind of mental issues that I don't know what they maybe they think they're being intelligent or clever or whatever, but when the bottom line comes in where the rubber meets the road, they don't know what the hell they're saying.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's pretty natural to go through, Philip. I mean, I went through the same thing to where, I mean, you sit there and you go back over your encounter and you're like, God, did that really happen? Did I really see what I saw?
Yourself.
Yeah, you question yourself all the time.
And it's because, we grow up not having that you're not being taught anything like that. It's not in our frame of reference. So, you kind of scratch your head and you say, what the hell? Did I really see that? Was that really there? How could that be? I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you'll have to keep in touch with us. Let us know if you see anything else out there.
I most certainly will. Certainly will.
Ohio's definitely a hotbed.
It is.
It has been. I'm going to definitely, because I'm trying to get more and more into the groups, and everything like that. I just don't want to be associated with certain groups that tell you things don't happen. So,
yeah.
It's.
I don't blame you.
So I have a tendency, as being younger, of course, I have a tendency to treat everything like it's the Wild West a little bit, But it's the thing I like to reassure people the most is, especially if I feel someone's had a real true sighting, that it's okay. If it's a real true sighting, you saw what you saw. I've seen it. I've heard it. You aren't crazy. Trust me. Join we have group. We meet every Wednesday.
My name's
awesome.
Philip. I've seen a Sasquatch.
Hi, Philip.
It's very therapeutic. All of us that have seen these things, to talk to each other and compare notes on that. It's very helpful, and almost I can't think of a case where it hasn't been, where somebody has told me that it was a huge relief getting it off their shoulders, talking to somebody about it. I've got an account a couple days ago that's one of the best that I've ever come across, and I can't really. I'm gonna put it in a new book and keep the person's identity secret, but and of course they won't come on the show because they're afraid of the ridicule. But it's really an incredible encounter, so I'm looking forward to getting that out to people to read.
Can't wait to read it.
All right,
Philip. We certainly appreciate you coming on.
Awesome, gentlemen. I thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure is ours.
You guys have a great evening.
You too, brother.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks. You too.